right, we are back. And you know what? It's so great to see you. Today we're going to be talking about something that a lot of beginner photographers have a tough time with. I know I did when I first got started. And guys, we're talking about exposure compensation. Yeah, you and I are going to be talking about it right now. Matter of fact, by the end of this little clip right here, this is going to be a short one. At the end of this, you're going to have a better understanding what it is, when to use it, and all the other good stuff that comes along with it. So to start, exposure compensation is a handy tool that alters the exposure value selected by the camera. This means you can make the image brighter or darker by using exposure compensation. This is typically used to correct exposure mistakes by the camera. Though cameras can get exposure correct in many situations, sometimes it needs a little nudge by a human. And this can be used to purposely overexpose or underexpose your image. Exposure can be used in this way as a creative tool as well. Guys, I want you to think high-key portraits. When you view the exposure level on the viewfinder or the backside of your camera on the LCD, you'll notice the camera tries to get the exposure meter right down the center, right in 0. Using exposure compensation allows you to move that meter to the left, which is going to be underexposed, or to the right, which is going to be overexposed. So while the concept of what exposure compensation does to your images is quite simple, the underlying process that makes it work are less than clear. So let's examine exposure compensation, how it works in 3 different shooting modes on your camera. If you're shooting in aperture priority mode, that is A or AV on your camera style, you control the aperture in ISO while the camera controls the shutter speed. Adjusting the exposure compensation means the camera will adjust the shutter speed to brighten or darken the image because it's the only setting you don't fully control. If you're shooting in shutter priority mode, now this is S or TV on your camera style, you control the shutter speed in the ISO while the camera is now behind the wheel with aperture. Adjusting the exposure compensation means the camera will adjust the aperture to brighten or darken the image again, because it's the only setting the camera can change in the situation. Now, if you're shooting in program mode, it's P on your camera style, you control the ISO while the camera now controls aperture and shutter speed, though you can override these selections if you want. Adjusting exposure compensation means the camera will adjust the aperture and shutter speed or both to brighten or darken the image. If you're shooting in manual mode, that is M on your camera style, you are the exposure compensation. You control the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, so if you want the image to be brighter or darker, you change 1, 2, or 3 settings to achieve the desired level of exposure. If you're shooting in full auto mode, exposure compensation, guys, it's not going to work here. It's not even an option. This is because full auto gives complete control over aperture, shutter speed, and ISO to the camera. Whatever settings the camera selects are the ones it thinks are the best for proper exposure, so these cannot be overridden. And that's it. You're all set. Now get out there, experiment with exposure compensation, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Was this video helpful? Did you like it? Want to see more? Let me know by liking the video down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to slug the bell to be notified when we come out with new videos. So my friend, we'll see you next time.